This is a subject that's close to my long-term interests in research. I came to this city after working down at University of Texas, where I was doing a Leontief production function estimate of the impact of the unauthorized labor force on the wages of domestic workers. Lots of fun. Came here and worked at the Department of Labor, which at that point was empowered by the 1990 Immigration Act to actually put in place government research on these issues, something I think is always useful to put into any legislation, maybe because I'm a researcher, but also so that we know what we're doing pretty well. After that, I was at the commission, as mentioned. But when I came here, IRCA had been enacted, and I really didn't know what it was. It certainly wasn't something I had learned much about. We've heard about the history here today. Some of the history, though, things we know, like the Texas Proviso and things like that, the Bracero program, the relationships that it engendered after that, I was somewhat surprised in my research on Mexican migration to find that worksite enforcement was first recommended by the Mexican government at the outset of the Bracero guest worker program in the 1940s. And of course, European governments do worksite enforcement, usually bundled in their Department of Labor. And when I was at the Department of Labor, that's basically how we saw worksite enforcement, as an integral part of workers' rights, as a way of leveling the playing ground all the way around. Now, there are a lot of challenges with worksite enforcement, with how you do it. I want to talk about those a little bit because they form a bit of a background to what I think Jerry does, which is talk about politics. But that's not what I thought the problems were going to be at the outset. We thought it was going to be more prosaic things like money, boots on the ground, technology. It turned out to be basically finding will to enforce. So let's remember that it was, in fact, a grand bargain with IRCA. The Hesburgh Commission said we had to close the back door before opening the front door. And that's what happened. IRCA basically was to control unauthorized migration. That led to the 1990 Act, and the 1990 Act really did boost skilled migration and the overall volume of migrants coming into the country. But that was a plan. That was a grand bargain on its own, in motion over time, not comprehensive, if you will. But legalization at the time was seen as both a humane step granted to people who had earned equity by being in the country and working for at least 5 years, the main program. But it was also seen as a way of clearing the marketplace in an effort to control future migration. But the control of future migration then rested heavily not just on the border, which is where a lot of the emphasis has been, but at the workplace. It was seen as a magnet, but it was also seen as righting a wrong. The wrong of the Texas Proviso that let employers off the hook. Not to make employers policemen, but to make them an integral part of making sure that they had a legal workforce, a way of managing future flows. The Jordan Commission, which I was on the staff of as the research director, picked up that ball and said, well, we need to move forward with worksite enforcement, being more vigorous about it, but also recommended something called the basic pilot, which has become E-Verify as we know it. Now, what were some of the problems? Paperwork we've heard about, but also is interesting, one of the major academic critiques at the outset is we weren't going to be hard enough on employers. That is, we weren't going to enforce knowing hire violations very strongly. It was difficult to get to that next step. Of course, that and the very easy way of getting paperwork passed to the employer was intentional. It was intentional to basically avoid discrimination. My own research at the time found that discrimination using the then GAO survey suggests that IRCA implemented wrongly by employers led to about 1% of all of the unemployed Hispanics losing jobs. So it was not a widespread impact. At the same time, using the same survey, it suggested 5 years after IRCA that well over half of all unauthorized workers were using fraudulent documents to get jobs. Perhaps one reason there wasn't discrimination, it wasn't really being an effective screening tool. So these kinds of problems were embedded in it, and we knew it, and that's why the That's why we had things like E-Verify, which extensions and improvements in worksite enforcement really, we believe, many of us believe, will be effective. Why do we believe that it'll be effective? Because research on E-Verify now in the dozen or so states that are using it clearly indicate, look at Pierre Arrhenius's work, that the number of unauthorized in the state and those employed are going down. At the same time, the wages in states implementing E-Verify are going up for domestic Hispanic workers. Those are positive things. They're the way it's supposed to work. By the way, I've got parallel work from the early 1990s that suggests that fines in worksite enforcement function in that way. So then we get to Jerry's work. We've got the history, we come up to that point, and the problems that he focuses on aren't really these technical things. It's much more a look at a cascading set of failures of will. The odd bedfellows in the interest community, the Vidalia Onion snafu, the Vanguard problems, point again and again to a lack of will, a lack of dollars, a lack of agents, and a lack of ability to embrace new ideas and technology going forward. And technology, of course, is what observer after observer says is one of the things that can help E-Verify work. So I'm going to keep it there to make it short. But that's the world we're in today, where legalization has become an issue of earned amnesty, fights over political wills, instead of equity and clearing the markets. And worksite enforcement is argued that it should be off the table, when arguably implemented correctly, it should have the intended effect of controlling future flows.